welcome to this special edition of Talk Time. My guest today is Mr. Mark Davies, an Oxford local historian, not to be confused with Professor Mark Davies. He's not from Oxford University, but he's a local historian chronicling the waterways, the pathways, and the calmer side of Oxford, the suburb, and of course, a family member rather of the great-great-great-grandfather. His great-great-great-grandfather, Thomas Wood, was among the members of the first British contingent, almost the first British contingent to have arrived in Northeast India, particularly in Assam, and had surveyed the river Brahmaputra that flows within Assam way back in 1792. That is quite an interesting background of my guest today, Mark Davies. Mark, welcome to Talk Time. Very interesting background, apart from what you yourself do. I understand you still live in your boat in Oxford, and you have written, you have lectured around the world. It's very interesting things you bring out in your talk and your writings on Oxford, on the River Thames, the mystery, the myths surrounding the river and the area around that. And you are also trying to link up your vast experience in a very interesting lecture that you are going to give during this edition of Naturenomics, organized in Guwahati. And your topic, which you have already lectured, will be Alice in Himalayan Wonderland. I want to know a lot for my viewers from you. Your plate is full, actually.
Where shall we start?
You better start with what you do, and then we'll come back to your links to Assam and to India.
Okay. Well, you have mentioned the boat. I do have this rather unusual home in Oxford. I'm not unique. There are 100 or more people who live on boats, and it was that pure chance. That was a decision that happened by accident, really.
Okay.
And from that, I became very interested in the waterways of Oxford. That's my starting point. People know the name Oxford, but they probably don't think about the fact that it is Oxford. The ford is the shallow crossing of the river, of course. So Oxford is watery from its very, very beginning, as indeed is Alice. So I have looked at the history of Oxford, but also the cultural history, and amongst the huge number of novels that are written about Oxford and in Oxford, Alice is the most famous. But
Lewis Carroll.
Lewis Carroll's Alice, yeah. Alice's Adventures in Wonderland. But by looking at it from the viewpoint of the river, as a historian of the river, I, by chance, discovered a lot of new information about this story.
Yeah, but that's quite interesting because, around the world, when you use the word Oxford, everybody thinks about the university and nothing more than that.
Yeah.
So how difficult has it been for you over the years to explain to people who come and see you that there are a lot more to Oxford than just the university? It's a place, as you talked about the crossing, about the waterways, the pathways, and it's a calmer side of that mad rush that you see in London.
Yes, you could say it is a very sedate city, I think, in many ways. It's very small.
Yeah.
It's world famous, but it's small because the rivers prevent the flooding, and that's flooding is something that you will be familiar with in Assam, I suspect.
Yeah.
So here we've got that connection.
The threat of flooding is always there.
Yeah, it's true.
When will the Thames overtop its banks?
Yes, it's controlled now, but it still prohibits the city from expanding. So. How difficult, you asked the question about how difficult. It's not very difficult because there are hundreds of people who know lots about the university.
Yeah.
There are very few, actually, who look at the other side of Oxford.
That brings me to the question, Mark. What are some of the unknown facts which, people may not know about Oxford? Two to three highlights.
Help. Yes, that's a good question. It was there before the university. It was a very successful trading city. We have the name from the year 912. That's the earliest written reference to Oxen Ford. And it grew as a trading centre, which was fine until the university arrived and tilted the balance a bit of local trade. So there was resentment from the very beginning, and that has gone through the centuries. So you have what we call town and gown disturbances. Gown is the university.
Absolutely.
Town is the ordinary people, if you like. And we have had this real conflict in the city for centuries. One other little thing I can tell you is that Cambridge began as an offshoot of Oxford because of these violent confrontations. The students, or monks as they were at that time, had to leave Oxford completely in 1209, and they stayed away for 5 years. Some did not return. They stayed at a place called Cambridge, and that's the beginning of the Oxford and Cambridge.
Absolutely. Yeah. And now, you know, when you talk about one of your very pet projects or themes, if I may say, is about Alice. You know, even here, as I said in my introduction, Alice in the Himalayan Wonderland. But what you are doing basically is the wildlife of Wonderlands, Alice in Waterland. That's how you name it. Because when Alice, like Lewis Carroll's heroine Alice visits Wonderlands, she's confronted with, you know, plants, animals, all kinds of things. It's a fantasy world, fine, but there's a lot of reality in that. You know, talking about the river and so on. And how are you linking up that with, you know, do you think it has international relevance?
I hope so.
International appeal, rather.
Oh, I think so, because the story does.
Yeah, story does, of course.
It is extraordinary to me how many people from how many different countries and backgrounds and beliefs and so on, that you just say that one word, Alice, and there's recognition. I mean, it is extraordinary, isn't it?
Imagination runs wild.
Yeah. And yet, but yes, what interests me, I am a historian. I like to think that I am dutiful to the facts of history. And the surprising thing to me, even when I first started to realize that this was an Oxford story, was the amount of reality which underlies it. There is a huge amount of real history, real people, real places, real events, all muddled up and reinvented in Lewis Carroll's very inventive mind. But the river, you see, the river is key. And it's the River Thames, I should explain to your viewers, if you don't know. The same river which runs through London, you know, the most important English river. The river is absolutely key to the creation of the story in many ways that we don't have time to explore, I think.
Absolutely, absolutely. I wish, I mean, that can be a separate discussion only on the River Thames, but I have a lot to draw and extract from you for the sake of my viewers, Mark. So basically, Mark, I will talk about some other aspects slightly later. But, you know, when we talk about Alice's world, it is deep down under, you know, basically, you were talking about, but when you were naming a series, how are you linking up with the nature in the Himalayas?
Well, you've uncovered my secret in a way, because what I'm having to do, there is one small hill in Wonderland. There are no mountains, and of course she goes down the rabbit hole. All of this is strangely happening underground. So really my topic will draw on that contrast from the highest mountains in the world to Alice going underground. And that's quite a nice topsy-turvy way of looking at the story, which is, I hope, if Lewis Carroll was sitting in the audience, he would be quite pleased.
Absolutely. From somewhere underwater to the dizzy height of the Himalayas. We'll wait and watch how everything unfolds. On that note, we go for a short break. Stay on. When I come back, I'll talk to Mark Davies about his great-great-great-great-grandfather, Thomas Wood, who had surveyed the Brahmaputra in 1792 to 94. It's a 2-year exercise. And of course, one of the lineage, one descent from where the Anglo-Indian community, as we call in India today, has derived its name. We'll talk about this and lots more. Welcome back. I'm in conversation with Mr. Mark Davies, historian and author. Mark, you know, as I have been saying, you are linked you have got a family tree with you. You are the 7th generation belonging to the family of Thomas Wood, who was among the members of the first, almost the first British contingent to have arrived this remote northeastern part of India. And Thomas Wood in 1792 to 94, over a 2-year period, surveyed the Brahmaputra that flows within Assam. And later on, of course, he went on to survey the Irrawaddy River in adjoining Myanmar, and later, of course, a stretch of the mighty Ganges. Now, see, so long we were talking about your experience with River Thames. Now, you are also linked with the great river Brahmaputra, one of the great Indian rivers that we all know flows from China and empties into the Bay of Bengal. So can you talk a little bit about Thomas Wood, how he came here? I'm sure you have studied that, and what he did with the Brahmaputra. What was this survey of Guwahati, the report which he brought up?
Absolutely. So he was a Scotsman. He was born in Scotland.
Right.
He joined the British East India Company Army as an ensign, as a surveyor, and he was sent here to survey the river specifically in 1792, that date you have mentioned. The British had been invited by the Raja to try and reinstate him. There was some resistance locally at this time. And that's what interests me really, the difficulties that this young man faced when he came here. What was he? He was not yet 30.
Yeah.
So as well as the difficulty of surveying a river like that for the first time ever, as far as I understand, he had to, well, he got involved in physical confrontations, pistol fights on occasions. He had to stay because of the rain. There was a long delay in 1793 during the summer period where he was very frustrated here in Guwahati.
It was a very volatile political scenario as well. Socio-political scene was very, very disturbed.
No, exactly. And the first, well, he eventually did survey that length from Golpara to,
Golpara,
I hope I'm pronouncing that correctly, up to Sibsagar, although it was called...
Golpara to Sibsagar, yes.
Well, it was called Ranpur at the time, I believe.
Yes.
Yeah. But what is interesting to me, again, as a historian, and I am a geographer by background, that is my degree, so cartography and maps do interest me. But what's interesting about the maps is the way he annotates different British engagements and battles, and particularly around here, around this city, Guwahati, where there was, just before he arrived, in fact, right at the end of 1792, there was a confrontation of some kind.
So, I mean, by any chance, do you have a copy of this report, Survey of Guwahati in Assam?
Well, it's a map. He did a map. I believe
you have a map.
I have JPEGs of extracts of it.
Extracts of the report.
Of the map.
Of the map.
Yes.
Okay.
But Captain Thomas Welsh was the man in charge, and he did do a written and printed account. Published here, published in 2 editions, one in Shillong, interestingly, and one in Calcutta. I've not seen this book, but I know it exists.
Well, when you talk of Calcutta, there is this Wood Street.
There is.
In Calcutta.
Yeah.
Is it linked by any chance to Thomas Wood?
Well, my understanding is yes. I have no actual proof of this, but that is the verdict of somebody called Phillimore, who printed a huge amount of information about all of the people engaged in the survey of India, the different mapping over many decades. It's in 5 volumes, and that's where I have got most of my biographical information about Wood. And according to him, yes, because Wood ultimately went back to Calcutta and was briefly the Surveyor General. And his children were all baptized there. Yes, so he had and he died there. So his grave is in South Park Cemetery.
Okay. So, now, if I may ask you this question, is the 7th generation descendant of Thomas Wood, who is a historian in Oxford, as well as a geographer by training, Mark Davies, I mean, can we expect you to, does the Brahmaputra interest you? Having gone through those maps, those reports, etc., having already worked in the Thames, so this is a difficult river, Brahmaputra.
Well, of course. I mean, that is really the principal reason why I'm here. I have been to India once before on the family history trail. That was a different ancestor, a chap, same generation as Wood, called Matthew Leslie. Very interesting man as well, but again, we probably don't have much time to talk about him. I feel really privileged to be able to indulge my own interest in historical research in something so personal. And what I find is that there are brilliant stories to be uncovered connected to these men. Can you give me a small insight?
I mean, you know, there are lots of stories, obviously, at that time, you know, there are hardly any written accounts of those days, apart from the official accounts.
Yeah, well, I think in Wood's case, it's not one story. It's the fact that the difficulties he had. I mentioned the hostility locally that he had to deal with. You know, he lost a lot of his equipment. He had to get that back. There was the climate, but also there was the British bureaucracy. He, when he went on to survey 400 miles of the Ganges, it took about 5 or 6 years before his superiors deigned to reimburse his expenses. He really
4 to 5 years.
Yes. Yeah.
So he must have gone through a real difficult time.
Well, I think he was still
getting... He surveyed the Ganges from Kanpur to Haridwar.
I think, yes, it was the other way. I think he went from
Haridwar to Kanpur.
I think so. Okay. But also he did a lot of other mapping. And one thing I really want to explore while I'm here is that he also trekked up to the Bhutan border from here, from Guwahati. And again, we have the map of that. Nice little notes as he went along. I think that will be, while I'm here, I would love to just go and walk a little bit of that same route that he did.
Are you going to do it this time?
I would, if I have time, I would like to do that. It will have changed hugely because it will all be tea. It will all be tea now.
You can drive to that place today, so there is absolutely no problem.
But the terrain will be quite different because now it will be tea. Then it wasn't, of course.
Absolutely, absolutely. Even the terrain undergoes changes.
Yes, that's erosion for you, and that fits with the conference, of course. Erosion, I'm sure, will be, and deforestation will be an issue that will be talked about.
Absolutely. Now, what is the aspect of the Brahmaputra from your base in the UK, Mark? What thoughts cross your mind when you think about the Brahmaputra? It's, I mean, by the way, this is the only quote-unquote male river in India.
I did.
And it's a huge, big South Asian river, and with total control over the river by China, because as we are talking, there are huge landslides that is blocking the Yarlung Changpo, creating natural dams, triggering fears in the lower riparians that those natural dams might burst and water might just surge downwards and you know, lead to devastation. But questions are being asked whether how can there be landslides in the dry winter season? Are the Chinese blasting underground tunnels leading to landslides? I mean, those are different aspects, but the river is always in the news globally.
Yes, I think it's amongst the most famous in the world. I knew the name, of course, before I realized that my ancestor had such a strong connection with it. I have yet to see it, I have to say. I've been in Guwahati a couple of days now, but it seems elusive. You know, where is the river?
Where is the river? Where is the river?
All I've seen is the city.
You will see I'm sure you will have a good feel of the river sooner than later, Mark. On that note, we'll go for another short break. Stay on. We'll be right back. Welcome back. I'm still in conversation with Mark Davies, historian from Oxford. Mark, you know, your forebears were among the people actually were linked directly to the Anglo-Indian community in India. There are at least 3 to 4 people belonging to your family who had married Indian women, and that is how the Anglo-Indian community has emerged, and that's quite very, very interesting. Were you always aware of this? When did you come to know about this, or you always knew?
Well, no. I have to say it was a complete surprise. It was
Surprise.
complete new and a surprising and astonishing, really, revelation. Revelation. Not really. So my brother and I have taken a particular interest. My father is Welsh, and my brother was born in Wales, so he has investigated that side. My mother is, well, as we discover, has a large number of different ethnic combinations in her bloodstream. But it was only because when we were looking into a little bit more information about our great-grandfather, his name is Edward Hindwood, that we looked at the census from 1881, and he was a stockbroker in Surrey, and he was born in Calcutta. Calcutta, extraordinary.
Okay.
We, you know, that one word then has opened up this huge range of different interesting historical connections going way back to the Norman period, actually, with one of them, because he was from a family. Matthew Leslie, I have mentioned him already. So the Leslies derived from Scotland, right back in the Norman period. So it's extraordinary to us.
Matthew Leslie.
Yeah, so he is one of the four, and all of these guys, at a time when it was encouraged to have liaisons with local women, that changed a little bit later when it was frowned upon. But at this time, when there were so few European women anyway in India, it was kind of encouraged, really. So all four of my 4 times great-grandfathers had children with local women. And we know the names of some of them, actually, because they were left to question their wills.
You have done some work after that discovery.
Yes, because it is interesting. And it is, and I tell you what the key to this is, it's interesting to me, but it's also interesting to other people. If it was just interesting to me, I would get bored with it, probably.
So, Matthew Leslie, we're discussing that, there's this Leslie Ganj.
Yes, yeah.
Leslie Ganj in present-day Jharkhand.
Yeah, yeah.
So do you think that is named after Matthew Leslie?
Oh, it is. No, absolutely, certainly. And I tried to get there in 2009. We ran into a little bit of Maoist difficulty, let's say. So I failed to do that, and that was a huge frustration to me. And so really, I have been now this time with my friend Alistair from Oxford. And we were shown around, and it's a fairly ordinary place, I have to say, but it was a really special moment in my life, I have to say, to have been privileged to go there.
So what are you going to look for during your visit in Assam? Do you think there'll be, I mean, you'll find people whose generations earlier may have met your 4th generation great-great-great-grandfather Thomas Wood?
Well, do you know that
or is it too much of a ask?
Well, who knows? It would be wonderful. That was my hope with Leslie Ganj, actually. I believe it was named after Matthew Leslie because he was instrumental in arranging for land to be distributed amongst the disbanded native infantry. That's my understanding. I don't know for certain. And I thought there might be people living in Leslie Ganj who had lived there all of those generations. We failed to find anybody. Assam, well, it's possible. I think I'm really more interested in seeing, really, in retracing. We're going to travel up the river a little bit. So
this is very interesting. The Anglo-Indian community is quite a well-known community in India. We have got prominent people from the community. There are representatives nominated in the Indian Parliament. There is he doesn't have to contest elections. And Anglo-Indian community has a representation in the Indian Parliament nominated by the government. Now, does it, bring to your mind an idea that why not, find out people who are still in UK or England and bring them face to face together at some point in time? Is it going to happen? Is it likely? How difficult can
it already be? It already has, actually. I have already, through this discovery of this one word, Calcutta, I have got distant cousins in Australia, here in India, in Kolkata. And if I may, just put a broadcast out to your viewers, anybody with the name Leslie or Wood or Clayton, or very unusually, the fourth name is Ovedale. If anybody has that connection, please do get in touch.
Contact me so that I can pass this information to Mark Davies. Okay, now Mark, you have been at the Balipara Foundation organized Naturenomics. They put together interesting people from all over the world. This has been going on for several years now. Now, you have actually delivered a talk, as I had said in the introduction, Alice in Himalayan Wonderland. What may have been the highlights? What did you argue? What did you put forward?
Well, nothing very profound, I have to say, but it was a suggestion of mine that it might provide a little bit of a different angle. The fact that that I was able to link the story of Alice with my own direct ancestry,
right.
I felt was perhaps helpful to the people in the audience. And the two key things are the rivers again. You know, the River Thames, our biggest British river, and the Brahmaputra. That's how I made the connection and the association. And, well, I think evolution, that may be a surprise, but within the story of Alice, there is a very interesting Darwinian line.
Okay.
And I think that hopefully did strike a little chord with the audience.
Would you like to tell the Darwinian line?
Well, it's subtle, but there is an episode called The Pool of Tears. Those people who know the story of Alice will know she changes size. At one point, she is very large. She gets upset. She cries. The next moment, she is a few inches tall, swimming in a pool of her own tears with a vast array of different animals. One of those animals in the images is a monkey, an ape. Doesn't get mentioned in the text at all, but bear in mind this story was written in 1865. Origin of the Species came out just a few years earlier while Carroll was composing the story. It's certainly a topical reference to Darwin.
Okay, so that way, I mean, yeah, it'll be interesting to see what you do in the coming days, how you try to work on the Brahmaputra. You've got a lot of things to work on. One is the Brahmaputra, one is finding out, adding to your list of cousins in India, because the ancestry, now you were surprised, it's no longer, the surprise element is gone. Now you're on a search, and let's hope that during your stay or subsequent visits to Assam, you will be able to find some people generations later whose forebears must have worked with your great-great-great-great-grandfather, Thomas Wood.
Let's hope so, yes.
Yeah, let's hope so. On that note, Mark Davies, thank you very much for being on my program.
Thank you.
It was a pleasure having you.